Don't sign anything until I get there, Grandpa. Please. I'm getting in the car right now. That's what my granddaughter whispered into the phone at 20 minutes to 9 on a Tuesday morning in late July. Whispered, like somebody was standing close enough to hear her. Then came the knock. 3 of them, quick and light, the kind of knock a person uses when they've already decided they're coming in. I was 74 years old, standing in my own kitchen in my undershirt, with a phone in one hand and a cup of coffee going cold in the other. And I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this. My daughter didn't drive 90 minutes out from Pittsburgh that morning because she was worried about me. She drove out because she was worried about being late. This isn't a story about money. Not really. It's a story about what people decide you can't do anymore, and how fast they move once they've decided it. Let me back up. My name is Hollis Ward, and I live on 40 acres off the old National Pike, out past Hopwood, in a farmhouse my father framed with his own hands in 1951. The porch sags on the west end. There's a hole in the barn roof I've been meaning to patch since the Christmas before last. In summer, the whole hillside smells like hot grass and diesel off the trucks climbing the grade out on Route 40. 38 years I worked as a journeyman lineman for the Laurel Highlands Electric Cooperative. Climbed poles in ice storms. Hung in a bucket 40 feet over Gray's Landing in a February wind that could take the skin off your face. Brought the power back to whole townships at 3 in the morning while everybody I worked for was asleep with the heat on. Nobody ever wrote a newspaper story about it. That's not a complaint. That's just how it goes with linemen. You're only ever noticed when the lights are off. My wife Dorothy died 6 years ago. Lewy body dementia. 4 years of it. I want to be honest with you about that part, because everything after it comes from there. Welcome to Wise Dad Stories. Pull up a chair and stay a while, this one goes somewhere. Hit that like button and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're listening from. I read every single one. Now, here's the part where I'm supposed to make myself sound noble, and I'm not going to do that. When Dorothy got sick, I wasn't strong. I was terrified. Sold the pickup, cashed out the co-op pension early, and ate the penalty. Took a second job doing weekend maintenance at a self-storage place in Uniontown at 68 years old, and I still couldn't cover what memory care cost. $10,000 a month, then 11, then 12. By the 3rd year, every dollar I had left in the world was 40 acres of hillside and a house with a bad roof. That's when my daughter got scared. Rhonda's 51. She's a real estate broker in Pittsburgh. Does well. Drives something German. Married a man named Dale who straightens teeth in Mount Lebanon. And in 2019, somebody at her office told her about a Pennsylvania statute, a real one, been on the books a long time, that says, in certain circumstances, the adult children of an indigent parent can be held responsible for the cost of that parent's care. She read it 3 times. Then she called a lawyer. Not mine. Hers. I remember the meeting because it happened at my kitchen table, on a Sunday, with a plate of cookies she'd brought from a bakery on the boulevard. "Dad, this is just cleanup," she said. "This is so nobody comes after anybody." Her attorney, a young fellow named Trent Whitaker, had drawn up something he called a family settlement and mutual release. Rhonda would take her mother's rental duplex in Brownsville and $60,000 in cash as her complete and final share of the family estate, everything taken up front, taken right then. In exchange, she'd release any claim on this farm, permanently, so that if the nursing home or the state ever came looking, there'd be a clean line between her assets and mine. My own lawyer, Bernie Kasperzak, sat in on it. Bernie's 79 now, was 72 then, and he told her plain that he didn't love it. Told her the language was broader than it needed to be. She signed it anyway. Dale signed as a witness. Whitaker notarized it standing up, in my kitchen, with a bakery box open on the counter. She was frightened. That's the truth of it, and I've never pretended otherwise. She wasn't evil that day. She was scared, and scared people sign things. Dorothy told me that herself, in one of her last clear hours. She was propped up in the hospital bed we'd put in the front room, and she took my wrist with a hand that didn't have much grip left in it. "Don't ever let Rhonda be the one who decides things for you, Hollis," she said. "Not because she's bad, because she's frightened, and frightened people sign things." Then she was gone again, back behind the fog, asking me where the dog was. We hadn't had a dog since 1998. She wasn't predicting anything. She was worried, that's all. Turns out worried was enough. Dorothy passed in the spring of 2020. I was 68, alone in a house with 40 acres and about $900. The next 6 years I got by the way old men in this county get by. Social Security. A little cash work rewiring barns for neighbors who paid me in venison and firewood. I ate a lot of eggs. Then this past February happened. The furnace quit on a Thursday night when it was 11 degrees outside. I got the pipes drained before they burst. But I spent 3 weeks running 2 kerosene heaters and sleeping in the front room in my coat. Around the same time, the roof over the back bedroom finally let go, and I had a 5-gallon bucket catching water 4 feet from where my wife died. My right hip, which had been going bad for 2 years, quit on me entirely on the ice on the 14th of February. Couldn't climb the porch steps without stopping halfway. Couldn't get down to the mailbox and back without sitting on the culvert to rest. Couldn't do a single one of the things I'd built my whole life around doing. The orthopedic fellow in Uniontown looked at the films and said the joint was bone on bone, and he could have me walking by summer. Then a woman from billing came in with a folder and told me the surgical deductible and the anesthesia share came to $2,400, due before they'd put me on the schedule. $2,400. You want to know something funny? I've worked energized lines at 12,000 volts with nothing between me and eternity but rubber gloves and a hot stick. I've put the power back on for 11,000 households in a single night. And there I sat in the parking lot of a medical plaza off Route 51, in a 2004 Ranger with a bad wheel bearing, doing the math 6 different ways, and every single time, it came out the same. I didn't have it. I told myself I wouldn't call Rhonda. Told myself that for 4 days. Then I called her anyway. Because that's what you do. You swallow whatever's left of your pride, and you call your child, and you hope God. You hope that some part of her still remembers who carried her. She picked up on the second ring, which surprised me. There was noise behind her, a showroom kind of noise, somebody talking about lead times. "Dad, hi, can you make it quick?" "I'm at the fabricator." "Hey," I told her all of it. The hip, the ice, the bone on bone, the 2,400 by the end of the month, or I'd lose the surgical date and go back to the bottom of a 6-month list. There was a pause, a long one, long enough that for one stupid second I thought maybe. "Hold on," she said. Then, away from the phone, bright as a bell, "No, the 9 to 2, the honed finish, 9,200, that's the one we approved. $9,200 for a slab of stone to put in the middle of a kitchen." She came back on the line with her voice in that soft, patient shape people use on hold music. "Dad, you're breaking my heart. You know that. But Dale and I are stretched so thin right now it isn't even funny. Have you asked the hospital about a payment plan? That's literally what they're for." Rhonda. And honestly, a little edge came into it then, the first one. This is what happens. This is exactly what happens when a person refuses to plan. I begged you to think about your future. I begged you, and now it's an emergency, and it's everybody else's emergency too. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. "I'll pray about it," she said. Then she hung up so she could go pick out stone. Well, I thought, sitting in that truck with the phone still warm in my hand. That's the whole thing right there. And it only took 4 minutes. She came out to the farm 11 days later, first time in about a year and a half. I was glad to see her. I want to be honest about that too. So glad that I cleaned the kitchen on a bad hip. Took me 2 hours. Had to sit down twice. She stayed 40 minutes. Never took her coat off. And the whole time, She was taking pictures with her phone, the bucket under the ceiling stain, the kerosene heater in the front room, the sagging porch rail, the dish of pills I keep by the sink, sorted into a plastic organizer with the days of the week on it, the stack of unopened mail on the counter. "For my records," she said when she caught me watching. "So I remember what needs doing, Dad. Somebody has to be the adult here." On her way back through the kitchen, she stopped at the window over the sink and looked a long time down the hill, toward the low end of the property where the old switchyard sits. "Did Emmett Doyle sell?" "Back in February." "All 90 acres. To who?" "Nobody around here seems to know." She didn't answer that. Stood there another few seconds with her coat still buttoned, then went back to her phone. She hugged me at the door, told me she loved me, and drove back to Pittsburgh. I stood on that porch and thought, well, at least she came. 38 years I'd been a lineman. I could read a storm coming off that ridge 2 hours out. I did not read that one at all. My granddaughter June is 26, Rhonda's girl. She works intake at a legal aid clinic across the state line in Morgantown, 62 miles from my door, for $38,000 a year, helping people who are about to lose their houses fill out forms they can't understand. June and her mother stopped really speaking about 4 years ago. I never asked why. Wasn't mine to ask. But when that girl was 8 years old, she asked me why the big wires up on the ridge made a humming sound in wet weather. So I sat down on the tailgate with her and drew her a map on the back of a co-op work order, the whole corridor, the towers, the switchyard at the bottom of the hill, arrows showing which way the power moved. She colored it in with a green marker, wrote Grandpa's wires across the top in 8-year-old handwriting. She still has it, 26 years old, and that thing is taped to her refrigerator with a magnet from a diner in Point Marion. The refrigerator is how she found out about the $2,400. Not from me. She showed up on a Saturday in March with a rotisserie chicken and a bag of oranges, walked into my kitchen, took one look at me trying to get out of a chair, and put her hands on her hips. "How much?" she said. "June, honey." "How much, Grandpa?" I didn't get the words out. She was already sitting down at the table, pulling a bank envelope out of her coat. "It's done," she said. "I called them Thursday. You're on the schedule for April 9th. "June, don't. That's your money." It was my apartment deposit and my Philadelphia money. She said it flat, the way you'd read off a form. "And now it's your hip. Cars and apartments can wait, Grandpa. Bones don't. Philadelphia money." She'd been chasing a paid summer fellowship with a legal services outfit in Philadelphia for 3 years running. 3 applications, 3 rejections. This year she'd finally gotten it 11 weeks, starting the 3rd week of April, the thing that was going to put her in front of the right people and get her into a night program at last. 2 weeks after my surgery. "You turned it down," I said. "I deferred it." "June, I deferred it. And if you argue with me about it, I will put these oranges back in the car." Her eyes were wet. Her voice wasn't shaking even a little. 74 years old, and I sat at that table and cried in front of my granddaughter for the first time in her life. She let me, didn't say a word about it. Just went and put the chicken in the oven and turned the radio on so I'd have something else to listen to. She's the only one who ever looked at me and saw a person, I thought. Not a problem. Not a liability. A person. I had no idea, sitting in that kitchen in March, what was going to come through my mailbox at the end of June. And I had no idea that when my daughter finally came pounding on my door, there'd be something in the drawer 8 inches from where she set her pen down that she'd have given her right hand to see first. But we'll get there. Stay with me. They put me under on the 9th of April at 6 in the morning. Last thing I remember is June's face up close to mine, her hand on my forearm. "I told the nurses you climbed poles for 38 years, she said. "They said that's good. Mean old men heal faster." I woke up 4 hours later with a leg that felt like it belonged to somebody else, and a nurse telling me I'd be standing before supper. Every weekend for 11 weeks, June drove 62 miles each way, Saturday morning out, Sunday night back. She'd change my dressing, walk the hallway with me, put groceries in the fridge, fall asleep sitting up in my recliner with her shoes still on. One night in May, she went under like that with her phone face up on the arm of the chair, and the screen lit the whole room when a low balance alert came in from her bank. I read it before I had the sense not to. $92. I sat in the dark and looked at that number a long while. Then I did something I still can't fully explain to you. I took a picture of it, with my own phone. I wasn't planning anything. I want to be clear about that. I just knew I didn't want to be the only person alive who ever saw it. Not once did she mention the fellowship. Not once did she mention the money. Not once did she ask when I was going to pay her back. That's the whole difference, I thought one night, watching her sleep in that chair. Rhonda gives, so there's a record of it. June gives like it never occurred to her that giving was a thing a person could decide not to do. By the second week of June, I was walking the fence line. Slow, but walking it. It was a Wednesday at the end of the month when the mail carrier knocked instead of using the box. Certified. Needed a signature. 2 envelopes. One was from Fayette County, a tax reassessment notice, the kind of thing that had been ruining my month for 6 straight years. The other said Keystone Ridge Infrastructure Partners, LLC, out of Columbus, Ohio, and I had never heard of them in my life. I almost set them both on the counter and went back to the recliner. Nothing good has ever come to this house in an envelope, but Emmett Doyle had sold his 90 acres to somebody nobody could name, and my daughter had stood at my sink in March, asking me who bought them, and the whole business had been sitting sideways in my head ever since. So I took a chair and opened the Ohio one first. Read it twice, then a third time, slower, because I'd stopped trusting my own eyes somewhere around the second paragraph. Here's what 40 years on a bucket truck will teach you that a real estate broker in Mount Lebanon will never know. A data center doesn't need land. It needs power. It needs to sit close enough to high-voltage transmission that you can interconnect without building 40 miles of new line. And it needs water. And it needs flat ground. My 40 acres sit 800 feet off a 500 kilovolt corridor. There's a decommissioned co-op switchyard on the low end of the property with a right-of-way I've been mowing around since the Carter administration. There's a spring-fed creek across the north end. And Emmett's 90 acres, the Kimball place, and the church ground up on the Ridge Road had all gone quiet inside of 6 months. They weren't buying farmland. They were assembling a campus. And I was the piece in the middle, with the interconnection sitting on it. The offer was $9.2 million, 36 acres, cash. They wanted an answer inside 10 days and a closing as fast as title could clear. 4 acres carved out around the house and the barn. I'd stay right where I am. $9.2 million. I want to tell you, I hollered, that I got up and danced around that kitchen on a fresh hip like a fool. I didn't. I sat very, very still. $9,200 for a countertop, I thought, and $9.2 million sitting under the wires I strung. Then I looked up, and my eyes landed on the corkboard by the phone, where there's a photograph of an 8-year-old girl on a tailgate holding a piece of paper with green marker all over it. She's down in Morgantown right now, I thought, doing intake for people who can't afford a lawyer, on $38,000 a year, because she gave away Philadelphia for my hip. That's the moment something in me went quiet and cold and very clear. I didn't call Rhonda. I want you to remember that, because it matters for what comes later. I never hid one thing from anybody. I just couldn't come up with a single reason to call a woman who'd told me in her own words, with a stone fabricator standing right there, that my emergency was not her emergency. I called Bernie Kasperzak instead. Hollis Ward, good Lord. June told me you were up and walking. Bernie, I need you to pull a file today, not tomorrow, today. Something in my voice must have told him what kind of call it was, because he stopped being pleased to hear from me. Tell me. So I told him all of it. The corridor, the switchyard, Emmett's 90 acres, Keystone Ridge, the number. The silence on that line went on long enough that I checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. 9.2, he said finally. Hollis, that changes every single thing about your life. I know it does. That's exactly why I need you to pull something else first, before we so much as answer that letter. I looked at the corkboard. You remember that family settlement Rhonda's boy Whitaker drew up in my kitchen in 2019? Bernie went quiet again. A different kind of quiet. The mutual release, he said. The one I told her was written too wide. That's the one. Pull the original and read me the operative language. Word for word. Don't smooth out one syllable of it. He called me back 2 hours later, and I could hear paper moving on his end. All right. Here's what she signed. He cleared his throat. Releaser hereby waives, releases, and forever discharges any and all present or future interest, claim, demand, or right, legal, or equitable, in and to the Ward homestead property described in Exhibit A, including, without limitation, any proceeds, appreciation, easement, or condemnation award, mineral, water, or transmission-related payment or value however realized, arising from any cause whatsoever. He stopped. Bernie, I said, real slow, does that mean what I think it means? It means precisely what her own attorney drafted it to mean. He exhaled into the phone. She was frightened of the filial support statute, so she took her share up front, the duplex in Brownsville, and $60,000, chosen by her, valued by her, accepted in writing as her complete and final portion, and in exchange, she partitioned herself out of that hillside. Sole separate property, yours, as of the day it was notarized. I told her the phrase "from any cause whatsoever" was doing more work than she wanted it to do. She told me I was being difficult. And Dale witnessed it. Dale witnessed it. Whitaker notarized it, standing in your kitchen. A short, dry sound that wasn't quite a laugh. That was a very clever document, Hollis. Just not in the direction anybody thought it was pointing. I sat there at my kitchen table with the afternoon light coming across the floorboards, and for the first time in 7 years I felt something in my chest that wasn't grief and wasn't shame. Clarity. That's what it was. Bernie, I want to move on Keystone Ridge, and I want it quiet. Not even Rhonda, especially not Rhonda. I said it without any heat at all, which surprised me more than anything else that day. And I want a trust drawn up right alongside the sale. Irrevocable. June's name on it. A pause. All of it, Hollis? Every dime after the taxes and my debts. A life estate on the 4 acres, house into the trust. Her name, not mine. I don't want one corner of this that anybody can argue about later. My eyes went back to the corkboard. I want it airtight, Bernie. Do you hear me? Airtight. I hear you, he said. Give me until Friday. I hung up and sat a long while in that quiet house, listening to the lines hum up on the ridge the way they do before weather. They'll come, I thought. And when they do, they won't be coming to ask how the hip is healing. I was right about that. I was wrong about almost everything else. If this one's got you, do me a favor, hit that like button, leave a comment, and make sure you're subscribed. There's more of this coming. Because when my daughter finally showed up at my door, she didn't know about the offer. She didn't know about the sale. She didn't know one single thing about $9.2 million. She came to take the farm before I found out it was worth anything. She just got there 3 weeks too late. The last Tuesday in July, then, 20 minutes to 9 in the morning, the phone rang first. June. Whispering. Grandpa, listen to me. Mom called me an hour ago wanting me to help her get you to be reasonable. She's got Whitaker drawing something up. Don't sign anything until I get there, please. I'm getting in the car right now. Then the knock. 3 of them. Rhonda came in the way she always comes in, already talking, already moving, a leather folder under her arm, and Dale a step behind her looking at the floor. She didn't ask about the hip, didn't look at the leg, didn't say one word about 11 weeks of recovery she hadn't called during. Sit down, Dad. We need to talk, and I need you to hear me with an open mind. So I sat down, and I let her talk. She talked for 11 minutes. I timed it on the stove clock because I wanted to see how long it would take her to get to the paper. She talked about the bucket under the ceiling, about the kerosene heaters, about the pill organizer and the unopened mail, and how the porch step is a fall risk, and how a man, her father's age, living alone on 40 acres, is a headline waiting to happen. She had a printout of a nursing facility in Belle Vernon with a picture of a sunroom on it. Then she opened the folder. 2 documents, a durable power of attorney, financial and medical, naming her as agent. Underneath it, an exclusive listing agreement for 40 acres. Her brokerage, 6%. And I'll tell you the other half of it, she said, and for the first time that morning she wasn't reading off anything. She dropped into the voice she uses at work. Ground is moving out here. Quiet. Doyle. The Kimball place. That church parcel on the Ridge Road. All of it inside 6 months. All of it to limited liability companies with Delaware addresses and not one human name on the paperwork. Somebody is buying this valley, Dad. And they are buying it off old men who don't know what they're sitting on top of. She tapped the listing agreement twice with one finger. I have closed 400 transactions. You've closed one, and it took everything this family had. So no, I am not going to sit in Mount Lebanon and let some acquisition team in Ohio hand you a check for $200,000 and drive away laughing. And I want you to understand something, because it took me a minute to get it down my throat. She meant every word of that. It was all true. Every bit of it was true, and she'd seen it before anybody else in the county saw it, and she was right about all of it, except the one thing that actually mattered. This is love, Dad, she said. I want you to understand that. This is what love looks like when somebody actually has to do something instead of just feeling things. She set a pen down on top of it. 8 inches, I thought. That drawer is 8 inches from her elbow. And if I say no? Her chin came up. That's when the caretaking voice went away, and I heard the one underneath it. Then Trent files Thursday morning. Even as anything. Emergency petition for guardianship. Incapacity. Self-neglect. Unsafe living conditions. I have photographs, Dad. Dated. I have a documented pattern going back to February. I have a hospitalization, an opioid prescription, and a 74-year-old man with a mobility impairment living alone in a structure with active water intrusion. She smoothed the corner of the paper. A judge will take 20 minutes. And after that, I won't need your signature on anything, ever again. Dale spoke for the first time. He didn't look up from the floor. It'd be easier if you just signed, Hollis. Photographs, taken in my kitchen with her coat on, while she was telling me she loved me. She built a file, I thought. She stood right there in February taking pictures of my pill dish, and she called it being the adult. I got up out of that chair, slow, careful, hand on the table, the way a man does 4 months out from a hip. Then I walked 8 inches and opened the drawer. 2 things went on the table between us. Before Thursday, I said, I'd like you to read something. She looked down. 11 pages. And I watched the color go out of her face before she got to the bottom of the first one. 7 years ago, I said, you and Dale sat at this table with a bakery box and your own lawyer, and you were frightened. I've never held that against you. You were scared the state was going to come after you for your mother's care, and you wanted a wall between your money and mine. Dad? So you took your share, right there, in writing. Your mother's duplex on Front Street and $60,000, and you picked both of them, yourself. I put one finger on the page. And in exchange, Trent Whitaker wrote you out of this hillside. Read the words, Rhonda, not debt, not liability, from any cause whatsoever. S. Her hands had started to shake, and I want you to know, there wasn't one drop of satisfaction in me watching that. Not one. You didn't just protect yourself from my failures, honey. You converted this farm into my sole separate property 7 years ago. every future dollar of it, however it came, from any cause whatsoever. Your attorney explained it to you. I sat here while he did it, and Dale signed underneath it as a witness. Dale had gone very still beside her. Rhonda, he said, I signed that. I remember signing that. Be quiet, Dale. No. I remember the cookies. He was looking at the table now like it had moved under him. I remember thinking it was a lot of paper for nothing. That doesn't matter. She was scrambling now. That's an estate document. Guardianship is a different proceeding. If I'm your guardian, I control the asset regardless of who. A guardian manages what the ward owns, Rhonda. As of this morning, what I own is a life estate, a truck, and a bad roof. I let that sit. Now look at the second one. She looked down. It wasn't legal paper. It was one page off Bernie's printer, a photograph of a phone screen, taken in a dark front room in May, by a man who couldn't have told you at the time why he was taking it. Available balance, $92. That's your daughter's checking account. I read that off her phone while she was asleep in my recliner with her shoes still on. My voice came out quieter than hers, and somehow that made the whole room go quieter too. $92. Because in March, she paid $2,400 to an orthopedic practice in Uniontown so her grandfather could walk. And she gave up a fellowship in Philadelphia she'd applied for 3 years running so I wouldn't have to recover alone. Dale finally looked up. $92, I said. And that same week, you were on the phone approving a $9,200 countertop while I sat in a parking lot doing arithmetic. Nobody said anything. Out on the ridge, the lines were humming. You go on and file Thursday if you want to. Bring Whitaker. Bring every lawyer in this county. But before you do, you explain to a judge how you intend to reach an asset your own attorney released you from, in writing, 7 years ago, on your advice, with your husband as the witness. And then explain to that same judge where you were the week your father needed $2,400 and where your daughter was. June came through the door 20 minutes later, out of breath, car keys still in her hand. She stopped dead in the doorway, looking at her mother's face. Grandpa, what did you do? Nothing, I said. It was all already done. That's the trouble with paperwork. Then I told them about the corridor and the switchyard and the spring, about Emmett's 90 acres and the church parcel, about a company in Columbus that needed 400 megawatts of interconnection and a piece of ground with the wires already on it. I told them the sale closed 3 weeks ago. $9.2 million, 36 acres. I kept 4, and the house. Rhonda made a sound I'd never heard her make. And it's in an irrevocable trust, I said. Every dollar of it. Signed a week ago Friday. June's name. June had gone completely still. Bernie wired her student loans off Monday morning, I said. There's a check going to Philadelphia to undefer that fellowship, and there's money behind the clinic in Morgantown, so those folks don't have to keep turning people away on Fridays. This house goes into the trust with her name on the deed and a life estate for me, so I can die on this porch and nobody can move me off it. And there's a truck coming that's newer than 2004, and she's going to fuss at me about it. I folded my hands on the table. Rhonda, I'm not doing this to hurt you. I want you to hear that, because it's true. I'm not cutting you out. You took your share in 2019. You chose it, you signed for it, and you got exactly what you asked for. You wanted to be free of my mistakes. I looked at her a long moment. Well, congratulations, honey. You are. Completely. It just turned out my mistakes were the last thing on that hillside worth anything. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. 51 years I'd known that woman as my daughter, and I'd never once seen her without a single word. Then she found one. I told you. It came out strange, almost wondering. I stood right there in your kitchen, and I told you somebody was buying this valley. You did, I said. You were the only person in this family who saw it coming, Rhonda. You've got a better head for this than I ever had. And I mean that. I let it sit a second. You just couldn't think of one single reason to tell me about it until you had a pen in your hand. Go on home now, I said. Both of you. Dale went first. Didn't say anything. Couldn't seem to look at either of us. Rhonda stopped in the kitchen doorway because her daughter was standing in it. 4 years since the two of them had really spoken, and there they were, 18 inches apart, neither one moving. You knew about this, Rhonda said. I've known about it for 11 minutes. June didn't step aside. You want to know what I did know, Mom? That he had a hole in his roof in February. So did you. You took a picture of it. That was all of it. Rhonda went past her and out. No slammed door. No last word. Just two people walking to a German car in my gravel driveway, working out in real time that the cleverest thing either of them ever did was the exact thing that locked them out of it. June stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms wrapped around herself. Grandpa, you didn't have to give me all of it. Yeah, I said. I did. I walked over slow, hand on the counter, and put my arm around her, and we stood there a while, not saying anything. Over on the corkboard there's a photograph of a girl on a tailgate holding a piece of paper with green marker on it. Grandpa's wires, in 8-year-old handwriting, with arrows showing which way the power moves. Cars and apartments can wait, Grandpa, she'd told me in March, with $92 to her name. Bones don't. She was right about that. Turned out I couldn't be replaced either. Not to her. Dorothy told me once that frightened people sign things. She was worried about me, not warning me there's no way on earth she could have known how it would land. But she was right, too. Frightened people do sign things. And 7 years later, one of those signatures paid for a girl's whole life. Bernie called me in August with one more piece of it. During the assembly, somebody on the Keystone Ridge acquisition team had been told by a broker in Pittsburgh that she represented the Ward parcel, which she did not, and never had. It went into the file. When the deal closed without her, her firm sat her down and asked her some questions she couldn't answer. I didn't ask for that, and I take no pleasure in it. It's just what happens when you spend 7 years telling everybody you're the responsible one. Me, I sit out on that porch most evenings now, with a fresh hip and a bad roof. I've finally got somebody coming to fix. 38 years I hung on those lines in the ice so other people could have light. Turns out they were humming for me the whole time. I just had to live long enough to hear it. If this story got you, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from. I'll see you on the next one.